While we're waiting, I want to show you something. This is Bob Rieger design skill.
All right.
Okay.
Da-da-da.
I have always been critical of the Quawu hand because the hinges floppy. So using my drill, this is all mechanical, no CAD. I drilled a hole through the phalanx, strung crystal string in a Quawu. This is a one-finger Quawu, right? To try to, and the flexible hinge is in here, but it's just meant to hold the parts together because.
Huh. I'm not familiar.
So what did you do?
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with the Quawu hand to know how that's different. What exactly is different with that, Bob?
Well, a typical Quawu has TPU hinges, just like this.
Okay.
That's it. So it flops around typically.
Ah, okay.
And when you try to close it, kind of weakly closes and then comes up a little bit. I've always been critical.
Okay.
So
well, that looks nice.
Using the crystal string and tensioning it.
Crystal string. What are you talking about?
This is a elastic string that's used in the beading, making jewelry.
I can't see it. Can you?
No, it's
on the inside.
It's on the inside. What I did with here, if I take this off, you can see it I don't know, it's hard here, right? You can see it.
Slow down.
Right here.
There it is.
It's
interesting.
Yeah, it's a transparent.
Transparent elastic.
Yeah.
And by putting that
elastic.
Yep.
And what I did was, this is a transparent elastic material. And what I did was I drilled a hole through the phalanx, which was crooked because it's a long, blind drill. And I threaded it, tensioned it through the phalanx up to the fingertip here. It's much like the Raptor hand.
Yeah.
They use regular elastic.
Got it.
But it's hidden, you can't see it. And it provides a much more positive return action and stronger grip.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's Bob Rieger's design.
Well, that's great.
I showed
write
it
it
Nate.
up, Bob.
I showed it to Nate and never got a response, but he's busy, so.
Well, I mean, it would be worthwhile to find somebody with the modeling skills to model in those channels that you drilled so that other people could do that more easily.
Yeah. I almost
got
got
your
it.
recording turned on, Jeremy? Did you get that?
I do. Let me make sure I do. I think so. Yeah, it's running, so I could include that in the recording if you'd like.
Anyway, with all due respect to Jack built a great hand, but I just always felt the grip was not as robust as it could be. The fingers, unless you use the 95 shore hardness TPU, would kind of flop around a little bit. But even with the 95, they don't really, it's sort of If you look at any of the videos, like Ahmad's video of the young boy, Muhammad, you see the hand kind of closes like that.
Well, that's kind of the way it is with all the flexi hand devices, because they use those TPU hinges. I've always found those to be a little bit weak.
Which I think is a real problem.
But look at this.
Yeah.
So what did you do to make it more willing to bend?
Well, I stretched the crystal string and tensioned it, which is what the Raptor hand does.
Yeah, it's just a matter of having the elastics positioned such that they have enough give.
But there are two issues. One issue is that it's hard to get the finger to bend.
Well, there's two.
It's not going to help that.
Well, it does. I mean, because the string goes all the way through the phalanx to the tip. So.
Yeah, these TPU hinges, John, they're not very thick. So I don't think in this particular design you're going to have too much of an issue with bending. It's just that you weren't getting good return motion.
So what I did was I took the concept from Dean Rock of crystal string and applied it to the Raptor design through the Quo, and Sean Matheson thinks it works great.
All right, guys, let's move on. So we're running a little late here. Let's get into our usual meeting. So as I said, we are recording. I'll include that last part in the recording, but let's go ahead and get into our agenda here. Quick review of action items. The first one is just kind of hanging out for later for me to make some updates on Enable Web Central. Right now, we're still focused on the migration, which we're about ready to pull the trigger on, by the way. Next one is for John, working on the Google Ads application for nonprofit. Any updates there, John? Going around the loop again?
Yeah, I've gone around the block 3 times already. But once again, they've said your pre-qualification survey needs work.
Okay.
I'm now dealing, so I'm going around again.
Okay. And then the next one is for you to kind of have some discussion with Aaron Westbrook and then eventually Diane Farabi. Any updates there?
No, I didn't hear from Aaron. I did ping him just a couple of days ago. Still haven't heard. I think it's time just to write directly to Diane.
Okay, sounds good. All right, then next one is for both John and Bob to reach out to various folks about possible donations to the crowdfunding campaign, although we will have some further discussion about that crowdfunding campaign and the timing thereof. But have you guys had any discussions with people about that?
I wrote to several, probably half a dozen previous donors. I frankly haven't heard anything back.
Okay.
I haven't written to Red Hat just because they just recently made a donation.
Okay.
And because the other half of that donation from IBM is still not in hand.
Got it. Okay. And Bob, I saw you did have some emails with the Dell folks.
But the end result is it's kind of an unknown at this point.
It is, and that's why we're going to talk about that in a short while, because I think the timing of the crowdfunding campaign is a little up in the air right now anyway. I don't know that this is the best time to be asking people for money with everything going on and people being out of work and whatnot.
1000%.
So we'll come back to that. Let's move on. I've got the stats on the next page of the notes, page 2. I won't go through those except to point out the fact that our total forum post has jumped to 13,980. So I guess that means the import project is going on. So that's pretty cool. We had quite a jump in the number of posts. I haven't had a chance to go in there and poke around yet, but I'll have to look at that later. So on to page 3 for our actual agenda. I'm not sure that we can really go into this first topic right now, the strategic goals and objectives. I think the main point was to kind of talk through the notes from Ahmad, and it doesn't look like he was able to join us today. So I'm wondering if we should put this off until another time. What do you guys think?
I do.
Okay.
I think it's good.
So
Good idea.
So let's move past that, going right on to, as I just mentioned, the hub hosting and import project. And before I get your update, Ben, let me just point out I added a note to the bottom here, a bullet saying, hey, do we need to do anything to make sure that Google Analytics continues working after we flip over to Azure? I just wanted to put that out there for consideration.
In terms of the new hub, or?
Yeah, for migrating the hub over to Azure, once we flip it over, I've got Google Analytics code embedded right now. I need to make sure that that transfers over. I don't know if I'm going to need to change anything on the Google Analytics side to make that continue working. I just wanted to bring that up for Masvi to look at.
Right, that's a great point. We should definitely check that out.
So as of now, where do you want to give us an update? Where do we stand? Am I correct in assuming that the import has been done?
Yeah, so Masvi started it last night around 11 p.m. East Coast time. We got an email about 19 minutes ago saying that the queue is clear and everything should be back to normal.
Okay.
So everything should have run through its course. And there's a couple minor things to keep an eye out for. So if you do get a page error, it's worthwhile to take the URL and send it to Masvi.
Okay.
But,
so are we still on the previous hosting of the hub, or has he also done the migration to Azure?
it should be all rehosted.
Really?
This
Oh,
is-
okay.
This is on Azure now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're on Azure, and we're also on the newest version of the hub. So
Interesting.
Are
Even
you sure
the-
about that part?
that's what he said in the
Okay.
last email. Although I did a test on the search, and I noticed this is about 2 hours ago that there were still some issues with the search. But we should have, according to his email, the newest version of Hub. Yep, and we still have the search error. So maybe that's not the case,
Okay.
but he did mention it in an email. So something to keep an eye out for. Not a big deal in terms of any kind of change in use for us. It's sort of just more of the same. But it's great that we've got all these puzzle pieces moving, and Masby made time to do it, knowing that he'd be really busy with some other projects starting Monday. So that was really thoughtful of him and John to get that together.
Yeah, very nice. Looks like he did a great job. I mean, I wasn't even aware that it had happened, which is the best thing we could say about a migration.
Yeah, no news is good news. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we have 40 times more content. So the toolkit that John has been working on, getting that into place in the next couple chapters for us, I think is going to make a big difference. Right now, all those old posts aren't all that accessible. So that toolkit that John made will allow for that, but that's sort of the next step.
Okay. On a side note, that reminds me, I wanted to ask you, John, are you still using that export that we're doing from e-NABLE Web Central with all the badging data? Is that still being pulled into the
It is.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Our developers were asking if that was something that had to be migrated to, so I'll tell them that it is still being used. Okay. Anything else on the hub hosting and import project, Ben?
I think we're good to go. It's just keep an eye out for any errors that you spot. For example, the search. If we type in Lithuania, it still pops up as internal error.
It's a really weird issue. It seems like any search that contains the word "in" has a problem, which you would think that's an easy bug to fix. It's obviously a matter of how the queries are being handled, but they haven't fixed it yet. So hopefully they will.
I have a little bit of news there, which is now that we've got the Google import under control. First of all, the macroscope that I built is in the queue to be rewritten by Masby.
Okay.
So that's good. My macroscope is not currently online, but it works and it's a good prototype. I yesterday managed to download and process all of the posts and comments from the Facebook research and development group. So I think about 900 comments, if I remember correctly, 900 threads, which will then become incorporated into the thing as well. I will just say for the record that that's a private group. Our strategy here, as with Google Plus, is to make that information visible to people who are logged into the hub, not to the general public. I take that as my adherence to the spirit, if not the letter, of the various privacy and online rules of Google and of Facebook. And if they don't like it, screw them. That's my attitude on this.
Fair enough.
What do you really think about it, John?
All right, so...
And now you're implicated. That's the point.
I've just joined to hear John saying "screw him."
Yeah.
And
You thought you're on the wrong call, right?
Yeah, you got the key part of it. That was the summary.
yeah.
All right, so moving on then to fundraising discussion. So we kind of alluded to this before. Jen and I had some discussion offline about, does it really make sense to be launching a crowdfunding campaign right now? I'm not sure that people are really going to be looking to give money right now when they're, having to figure out how to handle their kids who can't be in school and, some are out of work. And so we were thinking that this maybe should be postponed for a while. And I didn't really hear any sense of disagreement there. Is that worth further discussion?
No, people.
I had reached that conclusion also.
Yeah.
Luckily we haven't had too much of this media stuff out yet, so we can just put it on hold.
Yeah. So, the good news is that everything we've done is work that will be usable. We'll just, hold off on the resubmission until we see where things are headed here and the timing seems better and we can just put it back in motion. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Jen, I appreciate that you were able to join us. I don't know if you had anything to add to that, anything else that you wanted to talk about there.
No, I just I hope you guys are all okay. As a person who worries about everything, I've got like 30,000 freaking people I'm worried about right now. So
yeah, seriously.
You guys all stay healthy, and I'm gonna stay quarantined here in Seattle area, and try not to get the cooties. So yeah, stay healthy.
Yeah.
You too, Jane.
Yeah, actually, just as a, so I also am on virtual self-quarantine. I go for walks, but I canceled a lunch engagement. It's going to be virtual today.
Yeah.
If I may, how are you guys handling this?
The same. I think, like you said, John, and I think what they're calling now social distancing is probably the best thing we can all do to help control the spread of this. So, avoiding people as much as possible. I think, Jen and I are very lucky that we get to work from home, and so we kind of just continue as we have.
All right.
Likewise.
Okay, then.
All right, well, on we go then. So that's resolved for now. Our next topic up is e-NABLE 2020, and I think it's the same discussion there. We had previously said that it's at risk, and I think now we can conclusively say that we are not going to be moving forward at this point. Although I will say, I have spent quite a bit of time evaluating the platform that Ed showed us last time, Verbella, and I'm quite impressed. I had a demo. I signed up and had them, the Verbella team, give me a demo as well as playing with it on my own. I've come to a much better understanding of its capabilities. They actually gave me some additional controls they have some advanced kind of stage controls for presenters that aren't turned on by default, and they gave me those. And so at this point, we're actually seriously thinking about using the Verbella platform for the event that we were planning in April here in Chicago as a 3D Universe and Ultimaker and BitSpace event. We're still going through the details and still having some discussion, but it looks somewhat likely that we will go ahead and give it a try for this event. And
I just came from a meeting in Verbella with the CEO was there as well, and
did you?
We're super interested in it.
So the only challenge with it is that if you want to get into their paid platforms where you have dedicated reservable spaces, it's pretty pricey. Like they were talking, for this event that we're planning in April, I asked them about just doing a one-time event instead of their monthly pricing, and they were talking about pricing starting at $5,000, which I'm not going to do. So that means that we're left using their open campus platform, which anybody can use for free. It just creates a little bit of risk in that you can't reserve a space. So we're going to plan a certain day and time and have everyone kind of meet up in a certain place and just hope that there's nobody else there, So there's.
The one advantage, in the same way that we were looking for Deloitte office space for the real conference, we are now purchasing kind of office space for this. And when is the conference? Is the conference being held on a weekend or?
Yes, so it was previously being planned as a 2-day event, April 24th and 25th, which was a Friday and Saturday. Given that we're going to be doing it virtualized, what we're going to do is we're going to change it to a 1-day event on Saturday the 25th, and we're going to have 2 separate tracks. So there'll be one track that's geared more towards professional people and one track that's geared more towards educators. And, the Verbella platform, the nice thing is that it allows us to have different things going on in different venues, and we can have breakout sessions in different places. And so, it could be pretty compelling. And what we're going to try to do, at least our theory is that, we talked about, I think educators are really going to embrace this. They're going to really enjoy joining in and won't have any issue with it. Some of the more professional users, especially people that might be a little bit, older, might be a little bit less tech savvy and might not be as comfortable with a platform like this. So what we're going to do is try to figure out a way where we can live stream the event through something like YouTube Live, so that people can just kind of watch what's happening through YouTube, and we'll be through that we'll be inviting them to kind of take the plunge and join us within Verbella if they want to do so, or otherwise they can just watch the live stream and ask questions via chat. So we're going to try to kind of do both simultaneously. I have to do further testing on that.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I mean, I think that's really cool, because the same thing came up. So we had some quite senior people in the meeting just now, and to be fair, all of the the more senior people, some of them I didn't realize how senior they were because of how often they used the Gangnam style dance function. And then afterwards they were like, yeah, wasn't it weird the way Jill was doing that? And yeah, she's like this. I was like, God damn it, Jill, she was distracting us the whole time.
That's funny.
But yeah, but so actually they were kind of, there was a bit of concern about that, but actually everyone from that group logged in, and some of them weren't so tech savvy. But I like that. I like the idea of doing the live stream as well, because then it just gives that, it gives that option. And actually, what you could do is then up on one of the screens in the room that you're live streaming from, you could have then any sort of chat or like a Discord window or something like that. So that you see that you could see a chat going on. Yeah, I think that's really cool. Or a Twitter hashtag or something.
Yep.
I wonder if the technology one day will be that you upload some photos or a short video of yourself, and it actually creates realistic.
Yep. Yeah, they're working on that. I've seen some places that will you can go in and have yourself 3D scanned, and they'll turn it into a realistic avatar. It's just not widely available yet.
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm a simulation right now, so some of us are really ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
I knew real John wouldn't have said screw him.
That's right.
We never thought you were really all there, John.
So anyway, I'm thinking that if we can pull this off, and if we can actually make this happen and get people to our event in April, it might prove to be a nice test drive to see how this might work for an e-NABLE event.
And I'm wondering if you want to do a micro test drive by having SPC meetings.
We certainly
should definitely do that.
I'd be happy to try that. Yeah,
let's try it. I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Everyone should download it now, because over the next week, if you download it, and as I say, we do now have paid space there. It wouldn't be big enough to host, because how many people are you expecting for the 3D Universe event?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, originally it was the physical space had a capacity of about 70 or 80 people, but now that it's going virtual, it who knows?
Might be a lot more, yeah. Well, I think there's kind of two things. I think that, so we might have by that stage, depending on how trials have gone, we might have a Deloitte campus, which we could then use the same way we were going to use the Deloitte University campus in Texas.
Oh, okay. Well, if that option becomes available, I'd love to explore that. Keep me posted.
Yeah, because I mean, if this does catch on globally, then that would be the thing.
Well, so why don't we try that? Let's try next week's SPC meeting. We'll try doing that in Verbella. I already put together a little 5-minute demo video for our event. I'll send that out to everybody, and I'll send instructions on how to get set up for that, and we'll plan to do next week's meeting in there and see how that goes. That'll help me anyway to do further testing.
And I can invite you to our so at the moment we don't have a virtual campus, we just have a virtual office space, but I can invite you in there, and then you guys can come into that.
Oh yeah, if you would, please, yeah, if you want to just share that. I think it's just a passcode if you want to share that with me.
Yeah,
and what
it is just
I believe when they set those for those paid plans, it's based on the number of concurrent users. Do you know how many users is set up for?
It's set up for 20.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so that'll be fine for our SPC meeting. Yeah. So if you're willing to let us use that, please, send me an email with that info.
No, that'd be great, because I've spent most of the day in Verbella today, so because trying to kind of test stuff out and get stuff moving. So
wonderful. If you could send me an email with that so that I can include that when I send out our follow-up email today.
Yep.
Perfect. I suggest a follow-up action, and that we keep the whole discussion of e-NABLE Con open.
Yeah.
And the results of the SPC that maybe in October we have of Verbella.
Yeah, like we said before, I think it's very realistic that we could do an event. Not to say that would necessarily be a replacement for the conference we were planning, but I think it'll be a good event for this year, and then we do another in-person conference next year. Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll try that out next week. I hope everyone can join in. That should be a lot of fun.
You guys would have to go to the site and download the platform.
Yeah, you will, and I'll send instructions for
Yeah.
all that. But it's very easy. They have a client for Mac and Windows, but you do need to be on a computer for this.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, I found onboarding is like it's taken me about 15 minutes to onboard people. It takes longer to get them to stop dancing, but
Yeah, agreed. And they're working on some cool stuff. Right now their screen sharing ability to actually share your screen within Verbella is a little bit non-intuitive. You have to tie in with the free conference call app, and the integration is not very smooth. But they are working on incorporating that directly within the platform, and plan to have that in the fairly near future.
I was impressed with how well PowerPoint uploads.
Yes, PowerPoint uploads work very nicely, which is mostly what we would use. And they're also, by the way, working on adding support for Oculus Quest and Rift for those of us that have VR headsets. So that'll be fun to play with. They're going to have that within a month or so. Yeah. So yeah, it's a cool platform. So we'll try that out next week and see how that goes. So moving on then, our next topic here is chapter status and structure, including financial support. So we were last talking about the tiering proposal that Bob put together, and there's been a lot of ongoing discussion outside of our meeting. Masvi wrote up a whole proposal with a lot of feedback, so I'd like to just kind of revisit that discussion, see what you guys are thinking. How is, are we revisiting kind of what we want to do and how we want to do that? What's your current thinking?
You asked me, I think, in an email, or proposed that I kind of give a summary. I don't feel I can give a full summary of everybody's position, so I didn't study it. But, from the beginning, when I put the draft together, it was based only on some earlier discussion we had of, hey, how do we get chapters to respond more favorably to our request for data? So we can quantify ourselves better, and how do we use a recognition type system, extension of badging, to accomplish this? So that was where my draft came from, a very simple tiering. And then I think, Ben, you had some ideas about we could place it on the map and designate. And I tried to structure it so that it was not punitive,
right,
but it was aspirational.
Right.
Everybody started at the level you are. If you wanted to go for a higher level, fine, knock yourself out, do it. We hope you do, but you don't have to. So that I can summarize for myself, right. And that's where I started.
So then Maz...
Jen had some discussion.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, one of Masvi's primary concerns was that any kind of tiering is going to create at least a perception that some chapters are in some way superior or inferior to others. And I have to say, the more I've kind of thought about that, I don't disagree. I do think we should be careful about that. I think he brings up a really good point. And so I'm wondering if there's, alternate approaches that we could think about that achieve the goals of, really getting chapters to be more engaging with us on data collection and kind of doing the types of activities and things that we're looking for, but without, creating that perception that some chapters are better than others, or that you might want to, find the nearest platinum chapter or whatever, So I think Masvi talked about the fact that, well, we already have a badging platform and we already have that mechanism of encouraging certain behaviors. I don't know if there are, do others have, other suggestions of how else we might achieve these goals without going to this tiered approach?
Maybe just to jump in where Bob left off, I left a link in the notes with the SPC space summaries. That one of them is from John, another one is one that I added in just to summarize the email chain. When Bob first created the ideas of the chapter tiering, there was a discussion with Saif about spaces that weren't chapters, and that sort of extended with conversations with Jen, and then included chapter map reviews and how could we bring those things together. I think for what we're looking at, there is the idea of having added things that are optional that we can say encourage chapters to do, and then there's the mandatory baseline that Masvi was was really pushing to raise up, to say, okay, let's have the requirements to be a chapter be maintained through this automated script that he can write, emailing chapters, reminding them about some basic data collection that we need. I don't see a reason why we can't do both of those things, have some optional things. That list that Bob put together that we've added to, I think, has some things that should be optional and encouraged, but don't need to be required.
Right.
And raising the baseline also is, I think, a wonderful idea, and his proposal, I thought, was great.
So what does that mean when we talk about these baseline required things? Does that mean that he would somehow automate things such that if a chapter, for example, does not respond to requests for some data or metrics, that they would be like removed from the chapters map, or how would that work?
Well, the idea, and he sent an email saying that it wouldn't necessarily be something that they'd be removed like this, but the process that Bob went through to audit the chapters was really helpful for us. But it also was, I think, as Bob can attest, an incredible amount of work reminding these chapters. If we can set up a process that does it automatically at an incremental period, whether it's quarterly or however we want to do it, the emails are sent out automatically. Weekly reminders are sent out automatically. There's some sort of maybe a demotion on the map as a first step that basically just shows that they haven't contributed recent information. It doesn't have to be something where they lose a star, but it could be just something in the profile that it says, in red, the last date that the information was updated. I actually kind of
I kind of like that idea of not having a so when you look at the map itself and you see the pins on the map, there wouldn't be any visual distinguishing marks there. They'd all look the same. But when, like you said, Ben, when you click on one and the details pop up, if there was a red note in there saying outdated information or something, I kind of like that better. And that would allow, that lets people know okay, maybe this chapter isn't as fully engaged as others, but it's not like marking them out on the map as, inferior or something.
Right.
There's sometimes there's like a university chapter where their person who set up the email has graduated, and there's still a chapter going on, and nobody thought about transferring over the email to the next chapter leader. So sometimes that's the only problem, and they are still active.
Yeah.
But we just can't get a hold of them.
That has actually happened, Jen.
Sure. Yeah. But that's still something we want to address, because if at the end of the day, if we're having a hard time getting responses and getting answers from them, right, other people will too. So we do want to do something to address that.
And we should also not be afraid of what Bob did with the audit is, if we have inactive chapters, to at some point remove them from the map. It's not doing anybody any favors to have a map full of points that are dead links. So having that be part of the process is also really important. But as we did email back saying that having some intermediate step is good.
Well, I love the idea of doing some automation on this. That would take a lot of work off of Bob's shoulders if we could, automate emails, automate the checking of whether or not they responded and submitted the data we're asking for, and kind of automatically take these steps with maybe a series of reminders followed by some kind of actions. I mean, if the more we can automate that, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Just a comment about my audit. I want it to be clear. When I did all this work last July, which I'll do again this year, or some version of it if we don't move on to something else. I wasn't trying to get data. I was trying to just determine if the chapter was active or not. So the first thing I did obviously was to check for recent posts on their Facebook. So that took care of a lot of the work. Only then, when there were no recent posts, did I have to dig and communicate, and that was a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're truly asking for data from every chapter, that's unprecedented until this latest go-around that we did with the email blast.
Right. And as of now, where are we at with that, Bob? You said you've gotten about 60 or so responses out of the 150?
3 when I last looked.
Okay.
Which is still, a little more than a third. Still a lot of problem. In a greater sense, we're facing an issue here, I think. We're trying to talk around. We're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. You know, the chapters have been sovereign. There's been no demands on them. Anybody applies, if you meet certain requirements for badging, you get it. Now we're trying to say, step back and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe you need to do this and this and this. So there's going to be, I think, a huge amount of pushback to anything we do, and we're going to have to realize that.
Well, I do realize that. On the other hand, chapters remain sovereign. It's the map that we can control, and which is one of the few tools we have to, I think the point is not to flag superiority or inferiority. It's to flag and celebrate things that we think are really important. So if I can just summarize where we're at, the fact that a number of people think that implying superiority and inferiority is a turnoff, let's not do it. The notion of automating periodic requests for information and then ratcheting up the information we ask to include data is great. And because Mazeby proposed it, he's also the guy who can do it. So I think that's wonderful. And I think the fact that he pushed back and the fact that he's going to do it are both hugely to his credit. So salute to him. I think I am hearing a consensus, which I don't oppose, although I think that the map at first glance should not include the stars and other distinguishing features that allow you at a glance to distinguish more distinguished chapters from less distinguished chapters.
One option because I think it's a couple of points on that. I think if chapters push back in a way, at least that's good because they're engaging in conversation about it. And at the end of the day, we want to have a conversation with them. So in a way, I'd be more encouraged by a chapter saying, wait, this isn't fair, I want to have a conversation about this, than them just not doing anything. And that made me think as well that maybe rather than implying superiority or and doing it that way, maybe instead we talk about how the indicators are how active a chapter is. And so that's all we're indicating, because then that's something that's more factual rather than that's more objective rather than saying subjective. So we're just saying this is a very active chapter, this is not a very active chapter, and if you drop off a certain level of inactivity, then we would just say this is a kind of what's the word for it, a dormant chapter. And then you, because then someone can't really argue with that, because it's saying, well guys, you are dormant because we've said this is a level of activity that we're looking for, and you guys aren't doing that, so we have to take you off the map, because otherwise we're going to be setting a false expectation to people coming onto the map and saying, oh great, I'll be able to engage with all this stuff of this chapter, and then not being the case.
Yeah, I think
that's already in the discussion. Mazzy further, while pushing back against decorating the icons on the map, has, however, endorsed the idea that when you mouse over the icon on the map, you will get data as collected, as well as an indication of when it was last updated. And then, therefore, there's this final notion that when we've done this for a while, chapters that fail to update will then be radically distinguished from the map by being temporarily removed until they update the information. So I think I believe we've converged on a plan. Ben?
To add to that and to what Ed's saying, something that's worth distinguishing, Mazzy really pushed back on the idea of permanent levels for chapters, but seemed to embrace the idea of temporary highlights. So saying, maybe you have a new chapter that is contributing something, you can highlight them for a period of a month or 3 months, or even saying, there's a volunteer of the year, however you want to do it. So that's worth recognizing. The other thing is that if we look at the technology of the map, and we even look at, makers making change and other platforms that are doing similar things, there's the opportunity to have layers. And I think that really shouldn't be understated as a really wonderful solution to have more information, but not so much busyness. Makers making change is a map with 3 layers. We've talked about having potentially more than that, even having spaces be recognized, the libraries around the world that are that have the technology but not the teams. You can have different icons, you can have different links to the different layers, so you could send it out almost as different maps. But we have historically tons of maps. Some of them Maria put together, some of them John has put together in the past. Bring them all together in a single resource and separating them by layers, I think would be really helpful, including a layer that is maybe called something like recent contributions. And it would highlight the recent contributions, the chapters that are the most active, just like what Ed's saying, make that very visual.
Doing something with layers is one way to do that, but just to pose an alternative that might be simpler in the short term, one option is to keep the map as it is, where everything looks the same so that we're not calling anybody out. But on the chapters page, we can highlight anything we want. So when you go to the chapters page, you've got the map, and then below that, you've got like instructions on how to become a chapter. We could easily add a section under the map that's, the chapter of the month or whatever else we want to highlight, and just put it as content on that page, but not visually distinguish chapters on the map. That's another option.
When we were having this discussion, I was thinking, the chapters that do report back, if we get, the guys from Colombia and whatnot who are very active to give us information on how many devices they've delivered or something like that, we could highlight all of the ones that are reporting back and give a link to their website, their Facebook page. Basically, we're plugging them, and then in exchange for giving us data, we would also offer that spot, one of those spots, as give us a link directly to your crowdfunding campaign that directly benefits you versus going through the e-NABLE fund, because like the guys in Colombia, they're trying to raise money. They have actual employees. They need funding for to pay their employees and their therapists and all that. So maybe the reward for reporting back is you get listed in one of these spots underneath the map where people can see, well, this chapter has delivered 350 hands. This chapter, they've only got 2 people in their chapter, but they've made 20 hands over the last 4 years. And kind of like it would be kind of a chapter spotlight. And that way Ben would have, those ones would be listed, and he could just kind of go down the line and be like, and if they do have a blog written about them, then that can be part of the list underneath their name. They have been featured. And this would also allow them to, when they are seeking funding where they are, they can go, hey, look, we are a featured e-NABLE chapter. We are under the umbrella. They have recognized us for our work. Could you please give us money?
I think that's a great idea, Jen. And I love the fact that you're tying it with helping chapters to get funding. The only thing that I would add is I think that it's very important then to have the spotlight and maybe also the map of the different chapters be something that is public, so that because this means that external people can easily visualize who is participating without having to log in.
Oh, just to be clear, Saif, the chapters map is public. You don't need to be logged into the hub to see that.
This would be on the e-NABLE, on the actual e-NABLE
Oh,
website.
That's great.
And we could even go further and not just put it on the chapter map, but we could make a separate page, featured or featured chapters, so that it's not blinking, stars on the map when people go looking for somebody to help them. But if you are a featured chapter, you can point to the specific featured page, just like you have these are the people who have sponsored us. kind of page. So they have a couple of different spots on the public-facing website where they can point their potential sponsors and funders.
That's a great idea. I love it.
So we've got a lot of really good ideas here. Before we go too much farther with collecting ideas, let me just ask, do we want to take any action items here on people actually implementing some of this stuff? I mean, I think part of this is going to be on MASV to do some of the automation stuff that we talked about. But beyond that, I don't know. Volunteers?
Well, one quick thing I wanted to add is I think that, for instance, some chapter, I don't know if it might make sense to highlight differences in types of chapters. For instance, our group is doing, I would argue, more research than we are necessarily delivering hands. And so, for instance, like our group, if we're just highlighting the number of hands that were delivered, it would not highlight the fact that we're helping the community with research.
That's a good point.
So I think it would be helpful to be able to map some of these differences between chapters. This was just something that I was thinking about. For instance, also Everton had, he had a lot of great collaborations with hospitals and different NGOs. And I wonder if we can think about later how to highlight those differences between chapters. Because I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that kind of goes to what Ben was saying about layering, of being able to kind of break the map down to see different, maybe you only want to find chapters that are focused on delivering hands, or maybe you just want to see those that are focused on research, etc. It would be nice to be able to zero in on those more easily and see those different types.
Yeah, and there's even, people like Dennis Ward who churns out just e-NABLE kits constantly for schools. He's probably made 150 over the last 7 years, maybe more. And I don't think he's ever had an actual recipient, but he has stepped up every single time we need devices made for events. And I think those people need to be recognized on the map as well, because if, there's a teacher who doesn't have a 3D printer and they want, to have some hand kits, it would be nice for them to have a layer where, you need hand kits for your classroom. Are you a tier 1 school? Here's this layer. Here's these volunteers who will, churn out 10 hand kits and send them right to your classroom. And all they ask is that you send a picture or two of the kids enjoying it.
So
that's it.
I was just going to suggest, I think we've gotten a lot of good ideas and information here. I think maybe a good next step would be to, when I send out the follow-up, we can ask MASV to watch this portion of the recording. I think he's in the best position to maybe take all these ideas and come up with a proposal of how to implement some or all of these things.
Yeah, we need an action plan.
I think he's already done that. I'd also add that, what we were identifying in this conversation and through some of the emails is it's a convergence of a lot of different proposals. MASV's proposal is taking the minimum requirements and creating an automated system to raise that.
Right.
What Bob started with is these optional virtuous behaviors, which I think is also still worth looking at. What that expanded into is all these different categories, which Jen and Sipe have been talking about. And Jen also brought up the chapter spotlight. That's a part of this. Even the registration into the hub identifies, sort of what somebody's orientation is now. That's new. And that could also help us sort of separate out who some of these different groups are and what their focuses are. I think we have to kind of look at all those things coming together in a proposal. It's a lot of pieces, but I think it'll make a huge difference if we can cross paths with what we're doing.
So I actually think that the action plan is to encourage and empower Ben and MASV to begin, and the limiting resource is going to be MASV, to begin implementing the basic notion here, the automated system which will feed into the map. And that system can then be expanded with, for example, the possibility of layers or filters or et cetera, as well as some of the other ideas that have happened. So I think we have converged in a really good way. We know what we want to do, and thank you, MASV, and thank you, MASV, for what you've just been committed and invited to doing as you can. So I think that's great. I think that's a consensus. I'd like to go on to a somewhat related point if everyone agrees with that decision and plan going forward.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So Mazzy is terrific, and apparently he's greatly in demand and very committed, but especially because apparently he may be bringing Lithuania's schools online. He doesn't know how much availability there's going to be. Nonetheless, whatever Mazzy has done, he's done in part from Ben's really good monitoring and paying attention and guidance. I just want to say that Ben is currently working on a summary of his activity over the last few quarters, in part because he's sort of obligated. It's time for him to report back to the community on what all he has been doing, and do we want to renew his contract. So I'm just telegraphing that. But I also want to telegraph that I think it's clear that there are some things that volunteers can't do, won't do, or don't do. And Ben has filled that space quite well by doing many of the things that really require a kind of diligence and thoroughness that none of us, with the possible exception of Jeremy, who actually has independent incentives to keep him in line also, do. So I just want to say that I do think that Ben should push out his report on what all he's doing. And I just want to say that I'm convinced that right now, Ben is the one person we're actually paying money to. It's not a lot of money, but it's a modest amount. The e-NABLE fund is not really flush, but it has enough to continue doing that. And I'm just saying right now, I'm working on the assumption that if Ben does this good work of getting Mazzy on track, continuing what he's doing, does a report, but the present company knows how much he's done, it is time to encourage him and the community to re-up him for another cycle or two. It's proven to be very, very valuable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we've certainly seen quite a lot of benefit out of Ben's work. So I would say, I mean, my suggestion would be that when you put that report together, Ben, that you might want to go ahead and take that opportunity to put up a new proposal with that report being part of it. Here's what I've gotten done, here's what I'm proposing for the renewal, and let people vote, right then and there, because I think, you want to take advantage of that, the recognition of everything that you've done, which will be laid out in that report. And I think that's a good opportunity to ask people to vote right then and there on the renewal.
I agree.
Right. Yeah, the initial proposal was for 9 months with checkpoints. So this is actually be a checkpoint of the same proposal. It's taken, I think, a little bit longer than I had hoped to get some of the sort of community-led projects going, but things like the Chapter Spotlight are a great example of something that started with a lot of work on my end, and now we've gotten more submissions from the community, recently from Turkey and from Newport Beach, from France. So getting momentum on those kind of projects is really what I'm aiming for, things that can continue without somebody necessarily pushing it ahead. So yeah. I'll send out, by the end of the day, I'll see if I can send out a draft for the activities report of what I've been up to and sort of what's on the horizon. And I can just actually add it to that same proposal in a comment on Lumio.
Great.
Thank you for that side discussion. And now I have another Zoom meeting, so I have to go.
Yes.
Ahmad, nice to see you. We postponed the discussion, waiting for you, the one about strategic plans. Jeremy will fill you in. See you later, guys.
See you, John. Yeah, Ahmad, hi. I'm glad you could join in. We are actually just getting ready to wrap up here. So
apologies. I have to drop off as well.
Okay, see you, Ed.
Good to see you, Ahmed. Quickly.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah.
Ahmad, how are you?
See you
I'm
guys
fine,
soon.
how are you?
Hi, Ahmed.
Hi. The internet connection is bad in Syria, so I'm sorry if I'm back.
Oh,
Pretty
okay.
good from this end, Ahmad.
Yeah, it's working right now. But yeah, as I said, we're just about to wrap up here. We're just finishing, but we held off on the discussion about strategic goals because we wanted to have you kind of take us through your notes and talk to us about that. So maybe we can do that next time if you're able to join us again.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything last minute before we wrap up?
Wash your hands.
Yes. Wash your hands. Okay. All right, everyone. Have a good week. I'll send out instructions. We'll try to do this using this Verbella platform next week. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. See you guys.
Take care.